Hi, I'm your host, Marsha Florence. I'm Just Asked. Today's show, ladies and gentlemen, is Fair Housing, Metropolitan Detroit. Everybody can join us. Hi, I'm your host, Marsha Florence for Just Asked. Today's show, ladies and gentlemen, is Fair Housing of Metropolitan Detroit. And we have the executive director himself, Steve Tomkowiak. Hey, Steve.
Hi, Marge. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for
really
coming.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Now, Steve, you know what? A lot of people always have housing concerns, and so we wanted to give our viewers a chance to have some questions asked. And so I want to start off a little bit about yourself and what is Fair Housing of Metropolitan Detroit?
I've been working in this field, fair housing, for almost 35 years. So 6 years as executive director of the Fair Housing Center, Metropolitan Detroit, and then 28 years as an attorney doing primarily fair housing, other cases as well, real estate, landlord tenant, that type of thing. But primarily my focus has always been fair housing, also fair lending. When I say fair housing, it includes fair housing and fair lending. So what is fair housing? Well, it's like it would seem fair. It's that there's equality of housing opportunities for everybody, regardless of their protected class status. And when I say protected class status, those are categories or groups of people that legislature, either federal or state, Michigan legislature has determined should be protected against discrimination or adverse treatment. And the obvious ones would be race, color, national origin, religion, that. But there are categories or people that are in those protected class status who really shouldn't be treated adversely or discriminated against when they seek housing or maintain housing.
Okay, but now is it obvious when people are being discriminated against, or is it one of those subtle discriminations that people don't see coming until somebody say, did you know that you could have lived there and they're discriminating against you?
Yeah, that's the challenge with housing discrimination generally. It can be difficult to detect. They're not going to come forward and say, we're not running to you because you're black or because you have children or because you have a disability. If someone is ignorant of the law, they may say that, but typically, no, they're going to do, like you said, they're going to maybe conceal it, right? And in an employment situation, people can know, oh, I applied for this job, somebody else got it, and you can go up to the shop and see who got hired and, maybe talk to people, compare your qualifications with theirs. But you don't know often in a housing situation what standard has been applied. If they say, well, we don't think your credit is good enough. Well, maybe, right? But then you don't know if they approve people with a lesser credit score or people with a poorer rental history or people with less income. So I don't want people suspicious of everything, but I don't want people trusting everything that they're told.
Correct.
If you feel that you're qualified and you probably should have gotten the housing, right, then make a complaint.
Okay. So, so what's some of the typical violations that you guys come across?
Well, they run the gamut. There's no, the challenge is they're not cookie cutter. Every single complaint, every single housing discrimination case is unique, and that's a challenge. But it's also, I think, what I find enjoyable about it is figuring out what's going on and what should have gone on. We keep numbers, complaint data, other groups do as well. Roughly 50, 55%, even sometimes as high as 60% are discrimination claims involving disability. The second leading category would race. That's about 30%, 33% would be race discrimination complaints. And then there's other types of complaints that get filed as well. May be surprising, but in the last couple years, source of income has been our third most common complaint.
Really?
In many years.
Okay. But naturally, when a person puts in an application, they feel that they're qualified when they first put in an application, or they wouldn't put in an application, especially those who charge application fees. Now, are application fees mandatory? Is that a process
No,
that you guys are?
it's discretionary. Typically, if they're going to pull credit report, they'll charge a fee for that. They'll pass on that fee to the applicant, right? But there's a concern with the fees. You want to say junk fees. There's proposal in the Michigan legislature, a couple bills, to kind of reduce the fees that are being charged for people. But it's very, very difficult. People who have limited income, they can't do that many applications if they have to pay a fee each time. And incrementally, those are steps that can often lead to homelessness. So that's a real concern. Fair housing also intersects with landlord-tenant law as well. There's limits in what can be charged for a security deposit. It's supposed to be 1.5 times the rent. But that's for security deposits, strictly speaking, are refundable fees. Sometimes, like you said, the application fee is not a refundable fee, so that wouldn't count toward a security deposit. So the regulation or the standards for that is very lax, and there are abuses, unfortunately, with those.
Okay. Because, I'm looking at it like some of the areas are territorial, where people want to go and apply for a place to stay, and they already did the research and know that, I would like to live over here in this area, but come to find out, and I do have good credit, but come to find out, they say, oh no, you didn't qualify because of your credit, and I know I got good credit, okay, or because I have the disability, but you knew I had a disability when you first met me. So is it some things that are obvious, or they're just, hidden agendas, and people still should, if they feel like they've been discriminated against, apply for or charge a discrimination charge? Yeah,
see, there's no discrimination, like you said, unless the housing provider is aware of someone's protected class status. So, for example, if someone shows up and they're black or female or they have children, that becomes apparent, then you can see the adverse treatment right then. Other times, for example, someone calls on the phone, unit is available, then when they go out there, and then suddenly it's not available. That would be something that would tip off. So the question is, there is no discrimination unless something involves someone's protected class status. And you have to show, there has to be some awareness of someone's protected class status. Now, there could be things like emotional impairment, emotional disability, where it's not apparent. But then if someone asks for an assistance animal or emotional support animal and they provide a certification, then the housing provider is then aware that the person has disability. Now, other times, we were talking about it on the application, stage of it, there's non-renewals, right? We had a complaint, a woman was an attorney, her husband was in graduate school, waiting for him to graduate. I think he went to U of M or, but a PhD program. So when he would get out, they would relocate to another state, and she would then move for bar admission at that state. Well, a neighbor complained about the noise, and then the family had a 2-year-old. And I said, how is the 2-year-old noisy? She goes, no, it's a typical 2-year-old, not any noisier or less noisy, just a plain old 2-year-old. And so the tenant, the other tenant or whatever, complained about it. And so they issued a notice that they're going to terminate the tenancy because of the noise, right? So we got involved, we contacted the landlord, and they agreed to withdraw it. Except 2-3 months later, you know what happened. They non-renewed. They non-renewed. And so, we assisted with making a complaint with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, having investigated. But that's the kind of, there's almost an infinite variety of claims that can occur. Well, I'm not asking anybody watching this show to become an expert on fair housing. You don't need to do that. You need to use your regular common sense, knowledge of life and situations about how things should work. If they don't seem to be working the way they're supposed to, that's when you should say, you know what, maybe I need to contact Fair Housing and get some information. Well, I tell you what, on that note, we're going to take a break and come back with some more good information about fair housing in Metropolitan Detroit.
And welcome back to the show. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're just now tuning in, I always tell you the same thing every time. Get your pen and paper out. Why? Because you have questions. So today, Steve Tomkowiak, the Executive Director of Fair Housing of Metropolitan Detroit, is going to fill in some questions that you keep asking. So I want you all to know that beyond our show, you'll see his number at the bottom of the screen and in the credit roll. So if you need to contact these people, by all means do that. Because if you have a housing concern, you do want to have a question answered. And if they can answer it, they will. All right? So keep in mind, after our show, you can look and see down at the credit roll, get their phone number or web address, as well as find it in the credit roll. Or if you need to call us, 1-800-323-5336 at Just Ask Talk Show. We'll take the call and send it over to them. So, Steve, with that being said, is that a lot of people will call and say, oh, yeah, I saw that segment and I needed to know more information. So we want to make sure that they're aware that you guys will answer the phone and try to resolve their issues. But I have a question in particular.
Okay.
Is there a service fee for you guys?
No, we don't charge. We're grant funded, and our fees are free of charge. We've never charged. There's been over 8,000 complaints since 1977. No one has ever been charged.
Okay.
So
okay.
It's absolutely free. And it's important, too, to realize who we serve. Certainly we serve tenants, those seeking housing or someone looking to buy a home. But we also serve everybody in the community. So anybody from a management company to an owner to a landlord. We serve municipalities. They may have questions. There was a city attorney that asked, does the Fair Housing Act apply to the city? Which it does, but the city attorney was not sure about that. We provide all kinds of training, anywhere from 40 to 60 training events a year. A lot of them are on the housing provider side and victims. We participate in new homebuyer programs to educate people on fair lending and what their rights are with that. Our website has just a ton of information. For example, sample reasonable accommodation modification policies, sample criminal record policies, just a variety of information. But again, anybody who contacts us, we had a mom and pop landlord, and they had a tenant that had emotional support cat. The husband was allergic to cats.
Okay.
Now they couldn't afford to have service people come in and do the repairs, so they were concerned about that. What can they do? Can they ask to have her remove the cat? It's an emotional support animal, but he could get ill if he has to do service in the unit. So that was a question that they asked. So anybody who has a question about fair housing, I think it shows due diligence and good practice on someone's part to make that call. You don't have to be in the dark about it. Again, we serve the entire community.
Okay. Now, I do know you guys do some home repair services or something like that.
Well, we're not a contractor, we don't do repairs.
Okay.
But I would say half of our complaints, we're talking obviously a lot about fair housing complaints, but we call them housing-related inquiry. That's just the category that we give. But we receive, for discrimination complaints, anywhere from maybe 225 to 250 a year, but we receive an equal number of other housing-related complaints. That could be habitability concerns, disputes about security deposits, rent terms, charges, late fees, all of those kinds of things. We can sometimes, we're not a law firm, but we can kind of guide people in, for example, putting together a small claims complaint to get a security deposit return. There's people that are homeless because they can't, they owe from a previous landlord, and we can sometimes negotiate with that. So it's an infinite variety of the services that we can do.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Steve, but when you said, you can assist people in possibly getting their refunds or, their fees back, a lot of people don't know that. So today, hopefully, we will get that word out, because a lot of people say, I just lost my deposit and they were wrong. But then the landlord say, well, you overstayed your stay by a week or two. Is there something that should be done where a person may have stayed a week over and should be, retroactive, whatever they want to call it, to
yeah, a lot of it, I would say this, a lot of the questions that people ask, there actually are answers. These are things that have been worked out over years. HUD has answered a lot of fair housing questions. At the state level, there's a landlord-tenant guide. The Michigan Supreme Court or Michigan Judicial Institute has a landlord-tenant bench book, and just a wealth of information that is in there to answer exactly those kinds of questions.
Okay.
And so a lot of it, it's not that we're here to battle with people. It's often with a housing provider or the tenant explaining, look, this is what the law requires, this is permitted, this is not permitted. And people usually will say, oh, okay, fine, thank you. I got the answer. And that normally we'll take care of it. That's the goal.
Well, we hope, and I know you have some brochures that we're going to bring up on the screen to go over so our viewers to see that, you know, there's some information they can gather. So I wanted to let our viewers know that you guys come in various languages. Okay, you offer your services in various languages?
Yes.
Okay, and what is that?
Well, we do, our brochures are English, Arabic, and Spanish. We're a unique area. Our service area is unique in that Arabic is the second most common language.
Okay.
And that probably not, I don't know if any place of the country can say that. But we have 6 main fair housing brochures, and then we've added another 7 or 8. So quite a few, whether it's occupancy standards, anti-lockout would be another one, criminal record, but just a variety of handouts that or brochures that we can provide. It's amazing how much information that you can put in a brochure.
You got that right, but just knowing that you guys offer these services in various languages helps a lot of people out, you know, because some people are saying, well, I got to go there with an interpreter when they don't have to.
Well, we're a federal contractor. We must provide it, and we do provide all kinds of either ASL, you know, sign language
That's
interpretation, and interpretation in any language, absolutely. We actually have a couple cases pending. We filed 7 cases against assisted living facilities that were not providing American Sign Language services.
Oh, wow.
2 of those cases are on appeal before the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals. One had an oral argument in July, another one is going to come actually next week. And we've done investigations of other facilities that should be providing sign language interpretation services. We don't want anybody excluded from housing. We don't want any barriers to housing. Ideally, and it's important to emphasize this, fair housing is a win-win. What happens is this, it opens up opportunities of housing for everybody. People are disabled, elderly, young, it doesn't matter, right? They'll have housing opportunities. It's good for housing providers because they will what? The default position is to do what? Rent the unit. They make money. So they're not being hurt. The services that we provide may be assisting people with habitability issues and things of that nature. Municipalities like it because they want their housing stock maintained. They enter contracts with us. The courts like it because we help resolve matters so they don't have to go into court.
And most of all, the people like it because you guys have come to their rescue and saved them from being evicted or tossed out in the streets or, better yet, help them get into a place.
Certainly we provide it for everybody. But our mission, obviously, is to help people who need housing, who need to maintain housing. Certainly, that's our passion.
All right. That's a good way to look at it. All right. So we're going to go to a break, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to come back with some more good information about Metropolitan, well, fair housing of Metropolitan Detroit. We'll be right back.
This isn't a workout video. It's about how LLS has helped blood cancer patients like me thrive and how your donation can help countless others. Please give today at lls.org.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, now back to the show. You know what? I know somebody said, yes, Marsha, ask this famous question. Okay, I'm going to ask you a few questions, all right? So listen, keep in mind, you see the number at the bottom of the screen. Keep in mind, you can reach out to this gentleman anytime. Him and his staff is always available to assist a person who has questions about fair housing. If you feel like you're being discriminated against for any reason, or a friend or family, you want to reach out to Fair Housing of Metropolitan Detroit just to find out in general. Don't be afraid to ask. What I always tell you to do, just ask. All right. So, Steve, let me ask you this. I know somebody with a criminal record wants to know how to, well, tell me, do you guys handle criminal records in reference to a person trying to apply for housing and they have a criminal record?
Yes, absolutely. We have a complaint pending right now in federal court, just got filed about 2 weeks ago on the 7th. And other ones are pending with HUD. So yes, that is a concern. What happens is within the population, the U.S. has a very, very large prison population. If people get released, it's disproportionate the number of black individuals and Hispanic individuals that have a criminal record. It's very high. So if there is a overbroad criminal record policy, it's going to have an adverse impact or effect based on race or national origin, being Hispanic. So we have a case it's in Oakland County. In Oakland County, black individuals are 5.13 times more likely to have a felony record than a white individual. So if the policy is overbroad, it's going to have an adverse impact. So what happened is you said, sometimes people don't make complaints. Well, that's true. And so sometimes we send out testers or mystery shoppers, however people are auditors, just to go on site and ask about housing and explain they have a criminal record or a relative has a criminal record and how would they be treated. And so the law basically says, and it's borrowed from employment law, that just because someone has a felony in their record doesn't require an automatic exclusion. You have to have a more tailored policy, right, that will take into consideration how long ago did the conviction occur, what was it for, how has the person's life changed since that time. In the case that we have filed, I mean, it was so bad, like we had a tester posing there asking for housing for a 63-year-old relative who had a felony conviction at the age of 20, 43 years, and nothing else since then. And they were told, nope, can't live there. So that's overbroad. So what's the rule on it? Probably 10 years is overbroad. HUD had a policy for public housing back in 2021. It was a 5-year rule. HUD is proposing a 3-year rule. But whatever rule gets listed, first of all, it's got to be reasonable. It has to be a reasonable look-back period.
But let's back up here. You said a rule is listed. Nobody knows that these rules exist. So if I'm applying for housing and I've been out of prison for 10 to 15 years, how would I know to find, or where can I find these rules at, or how would I know about these
Well,
rules?
and that's the problem. It's a gap in the law because it doesn't require that those rules be posted or published or notified to applicants. That's a challenge.
If I apply for a place, so say I apply for 3 or 4 places in the same area and I get denied each time, can I come to you guys and say, listen, I applied for all 5 of these places and all 5 told me no based on the fact that I had a criminal record or a felony charge? Can I bring that to you?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And sometimes we get a runaround. Well, they say, well, no, it's a third-party screening company that turned it down. We had one, I'm not going to give the name of the company, so we had a tester call that company, and they said, oh, no, we're a screening company. We don't make the criteria. We don't set the criteria. The housing unit, housing provider does. The apartment complex is the one that gives us. We follow the criteria by then. The reality of it is, it's in almost every situation, it is not determined by the third-party screening company. It's determined by the apartment complex or the management company is setting the criteria as what would be a disqualifying felony. Now, let's say a 5-year, just for argument, a 5-year look-back period. Okay, if someone has a felony within the 5-year period, is that automatic exclusion? No, you still have to take into consideration the circumstances, what occurred, and just individualized determination as what's taking place in the person's life. Have they turned it around? Is it a felony like shoplifting? Or is it some violent type of offense or something that was occurred in a rental situation or against, a landlord or a property manager?
Or against children.
Right, against children. If someone is listed on the sex offender registry, of course, that's a flat denial all the way. So what that does, it balances legitimate safety concerns of a landlord, but on the other hand, avoids some of the overriding disparate impact against protected groups. So it can be done, but they just have to make an individualized determination. Where we get involved in these flat blanket rules, which is not permitted in employment and it's not permitted in housing. We don't want people with a felony record to be forever unhoused. The same way we don't want some of the felony record to be forever unemployed. That leads to further criminal conduct or recidivism or homelessness, right? And that's not good for society.
So these programs are hand in hand almost. When employment and housing seem like they go together no matter what.
The discrimination laws are similar.
All right. Now, let me ask you this. So I know you say you guys have mystery shoppers. Do volunteers, because you guys have opportunities for volunteers, your volunteers, are they mystery shoppers?
Yeah, they are. And there's many other volunteer opportunities as well. But yes, they go through a real strict training program. They're not out to catch anybody. They're not out to prove anything. They're out to get accurate information about what's occurring. And we have FBI-grade recording devices. We typically will do written reports of the testing, and then if it seems like there's violations occurring, we'll go out there and have a tester then record it, either on the phone or in person, so that there's no dispute about what's occurring here.
Right,
and then at that
right.
point, we can address it. What can we do to get the housing provider in compliance? That's the goal here.
I can imagine if something's been recorded and the landlord study denied it, and it's like, it's here on the recording, sir. I mean, that just probably freaks a person out. Yeah. But it's good. It's good. I'm just saying, it's good to have it recorded, ladies and gentlemen.
Do you know what happens most of the time when tests are done?
Mm-hmm.
The majority of the time, it dispels an allegation of discrimination. So you won't hear from us. But we will advise the person, look, I understand, you had a complaint and it seemed like discrimination or seemed like a problem, but when we tested it, it looked like, no, they were going to offer a unit to someone who's black or with a child or with an assistance animal or with a disability, that kind of a thing.
Boy.
So it's, if you're doing the right thing, no one should have any concern about the testing.
Okay. So what's that phone number people can reach you at?
313-579-3247.
Okay, one more time.
313-579-3247. I want to say 579 fair, but they said people don't like that, so I won't say that.
You can say both. You can say the phone number.
313-579 fair is what I want to say.
Okay, so those who didn't catch the number, remember the word fair is at the end of it. Okay.
Yeah, just think Fair Housing Detroit.
Okay.
It'll pop up. We serve Wayne, Oakland, Macomb County as well. We've now moved into St. Clair County as well. But HUD is real careful. They fund fair housing centers. We have all the counties covered, like sister organizations that do the same kind of work.
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned all those counties because, it's my last question. People are like, well, wait a minute, is this just, it says Metropolitan Detroit, but it's not. You got all those wonderful counties.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, Steve, I hate to run. I really do because you're.
There's a lot more to talk about.
It really is. So I tell you what.
Maybe you'll invite us back.
We have to have part 2. Is that okay with you?
I would really like that.
Okay, and I would love to have you back.
Thank you.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I had a good time listening because for sure I didn't get a chance to say much because he had the floor, which was fine with me because it was information that you needed to know about. So always remember, you can go to the bottom of the screen, get those phone numbers as well as those email addresses if necessary, and definitely we're going to ask Steve to come back and join us again. So what do I always say? I'm your host, Marsha Florence, and before we go, I want you to know we're going to close out with some fair housing information at the very end of this program. So for me, I'm just going to tell you now, I'm your host, Marsha Florence for Just Ask, and what do I always say? If you have a question about a person with a disability or just a general question, don't be afraid to ask Just Ask. I'm your host. Thank you.
Thank you.